You've probably walked past a garden that looked like it had been growing for decades, full, layered, alive, and assumed the person behind it spent every weekend out there, digging and replanting. But here's what most people don't tell you. Some of the most stunning gardens in the world are actually running on autopilot. And June's is one of the most powerful months to set that system in motion. The secret isn't rare plants or expensive landscaping. It's choosing the right self-seeding perennials. Plants that drop their own seeds, survive on their own terms, and come back season after season without you starting over. And once they settle in, they don't just return. They multiply. They fill gaps. They build a garden that gradually stops depending on you. Before we get into the list, I want to ask you something. Have you ever walked out into your garden in spring and found something blooming that you didn't plant that year? If that's happened to you even once, drop it in the comments, because what you experienced is exactly what this entire video is about. Let's get into it. 1. Verbena bonariensis. The first plant on this list is one of the most quietly powerful self-seeders you can put in the ground in June. Verbena bonariensis. And what makes this one different from almost anything else on this list is how it works spatially. It doesn't grow wide, it grows tall, very tall. Thin, wiry stems rise up to 4 or even 5 feet, and at the top, clusters of tiny purple flowers appear in dense, rounded heads. From a distance, it looks like purple confetti floating above the rest of the garden, and that height gives it something most plants can't offer. It layers into the mid to upper zone without blocking the view of anything below it. Plant it in June while the soil is warm and full of energy, and it establishes quickly. The root system anchors fast, and by late summer, those blooms are drawing in butterflies and bees in numbers that will genuinely surprise you. It's one of the top pollinator magnets you can grow, especially for painted lady butterflies and bumblebees searching for late-season nectar. Now here's what makes it special in a self-sustaining garden. When the flowers finish, the seed heads stay on the stems. Wind moves through those tall stalks and seeds scatter into the surrounding soil naturally. Come spring, you'll notice clusters of new seedlings appearing nearby, sometimes along a border edge, sometimes between paving cracks, sometimes in places that make you wonder how they found their way there. And here's the part that catches people off guard. It never feels like a takeover. The seedlings that come up the next season have that same airy, transparent quality as the parent plant. So even when there are many of them, the garden still feels open and light. That balance between abundance and elegance is rare, and Verbena bonariensis has it naturally. 2. California poppy. The second plant is one that people always underestimate. California poppy. They see it in photos, think it looks simple, and move on. But anyone who has actually grown it knows the truth. This plant is almost embarrassingly effective at maintaining itself once it gets going. It produces vivid orange, yellow, and cream-coloured blooms that open in the sun and close at night. The flowers sit above feathery, blue-green foliage that gives the whole plant a soft, almost dreamlike appearance. And when they bloom in mass, which they will, they don't look like a garden. They look like a landscape painting. June is an ideal planting window in many regions because California poppy loves warm, dry conditions. Don't baby it. Poor soil, good drainage, full sun, that's all it asks for. Rich, overwatered soil actually works against it. This is one of those rare plants where neglect is practically a strategy. The self-seeding behavior here is remarkable. Each plant produces long, slender seed pods that dry and split under summer heat. When they pop open, seeds are flung several inches in every direction. Then they wait in the soil, sometimes through an entire dry season, and germinate when rain returns. In regions with dry summers and wet winters, they time themselves almost perfectly without any help from you. Over 2 or 3 seasons, they spread into drifts and waves that shift slightly each year, keeping the garden looking fresh without needing replanting. And once you understand how they move, you stop trying to control them and start working with them instead. 3. Aquilegia, wild columbine. Third on the list is Aquilegia, wild columbine. And if you want a plant that quietly rewrites your garden's personality over multiple seasons, this is it. The flowers are one of the most structurally unusual in the perennial world. Spurred petals extend backward behind the bloom, creating this layered, almost gravity-defying shape in shades of red, orange, yellow, blue, and purple depending on the variety. They sit on long, slender stems above lacy, divided foliage that stays attractive even when the plant isn't blooming. It brings a kind of quiet complexity to the garden that more obvious flowers can't achieve. Planted in June, Aquilegia builds its root system through the warmth of summer and positions itself for strong flowering the following spring. Once established, it starts behaving very interestingly. After the blooms fade, seed pods form and dry on the stem. Those pods split and release seeds that fall directly below or travel short distances in wind and rain. What makes this especially fascinating is what happens over multiple generations. Aquilegia hybridizes freely. Seeds that fall near different varieties cross-pollinate and produce seedlings with slightly different colors and forms than the parents. So after a few seasons, you start noticing flowers appearing that don't exactly match anything you originally planted. The garden begins generating its own plant varieties. It also naturalizes beautifully in partial shade, which gives it access to spaces many other self-seeders can't reach. Under trees, along shaded walls, beside taller shrubs, columbine moves into those quieter zones and makes them bloom. 4. Red valerian fourth is red valerian, and this one brings something the earlier plants don't: sheer volume. When this plant decides to establish itself in a garden, it commits fully. Tall stems carrying dense clusters of deep rose red, pink, or sometimes white flowers rise up to 3 feet and bloom for what feels like half the year. It doesn't trickle into bloom slowly. It arrives in a burst and stays. Walls, dry slopes, rocky ground, gravel gardens, anywhere that drains fast and stays warm, red valerian thrives. June planting gives it the heat it craves to settle in, and once it does, it becomes one of the most self-reliant plants you'll own. It doesn't need feeding. It doesn't need regular watering once established. It actually performs better in lean conditions because rich soils pushes too much leafy growth at the expense of flowers. The self-seeding behavior is confident. Seeds are lightweight with feathery tails, similar to dandelion seeds, so they travel on even gentle breezes. They land in wall crevices, between pavers, at the base of fences, and along dry borders. And they germinate readily without any help. In warmer climates, you may find new seedlings appearing in autumn and overwintering as rosettes before blooming the following summer. What red valerian does for a garden over time is create repetition with energy. It's not soft or delicate. It's bold and consistent. And when it naturalizes through a garden, it gives the whole space a relaxed, almost Mediterranean feel, the kind that looks intentional and effortless at the same time. 5. Honesty, Lunaria annua. 5th is Lunaria annua, commonly called honesty, and this is a plant with 2 completely different seasons of beauty, which makes it twice as useful in a self-sustaining garden. In spring, it produces clusters of deep purple or white, 4-petaled flowers that pollinators visit heavily. Bees in particular rely on it as a rich early nectar source. The blooms are beautiful, but they're only part of the story. After the flowers fade, round, flat seed pods form and slowly dry on the plant. When the outer layers of those pods drop away, what's left is a translucent silver disc that catches light like glass. They glow in late afternoon sun, and remain on the plant all the way into winter, giving the garden structure and texture long after most other things have faded. Plant it in June, and it builds strong roots through the rest of the growing season, preparing for its real display the following year. Then after it blooms and sets seed, those pods split and release seeds into nearby soil. New seedlings appear the following season, and the cycle continues without interruption. In shaded and semi-shaded corners, the places most flowering plants ignore, honesty moves in and makes those areas interesting. It's one of the best plants for bringing life to difficult spots in the garden, and it does so entirely on its own terms once established. 6. Foxglove variants Digitalis purpureum. 6th is the foxglove, Digitalis purpurea, and by now you might be noticing a pattern in this list. The plants that self-seed most effectively aren't always the delicate ones. Sometimes the boldest, most dramatic plants in the garden are also the most quietly independent. Foxglove does something architecturally that almost nothing else can. It builds vertical rhythm, tall spires covered in tubular, bell-shaped flowers spotted on the inside rise up from a flat ground-level rosette. Purple, pink, white, cream. The colours are rich and the scale is commanding. A single established foxglove changes the visual weight of an entire garden section. June is a strategic time to plant because the rosette stage builds through summer and autumn, preparing for those flower spikes the following season. What follows is a flowering display that lasts weeks and pulls in bumblebees so reliably that the plant almost hums with activity. After flowering, foxglove produces thousands of tiny seeds from a single plant, and unlike large seeds that fall close to the parent, these are fine enough to be carried by wind and water into surrounding soil. They need light to germinate, so they perform best on lightly disturbed soil surfaces rather than thick mulch. Once you understand that, you can give them what they need simply by leaving sections of bare soil nearby. Over seasons, foxgloves begin appearing in the unexpected but oddly perfect places, behind other plants, along a shaded fence, at the base of a hedge. Each time they return, they add structure, and a garden with repeating vertical structure never looks unfinished, no matter what else is growing around it. 7. Borage 7th is borage. And this is one of those plants that most gardeners don't take seriously until they grow it, and then they never stop growing it. The flowers are a specific shade of intense electric blue that almost doesn't look real in direct sunlight. They're small, star-shaped, and they nod slightly downward on arching stems. The whole plant has a slightly rough, bristly texture that gives it a wild, unfussy character. And it blooms for a long time, from early summer well into autumn in most climates, making it one of the most consistent contributors to a mixed garden. Pollinators absolutely swarm it. Bumblebees, honeybees, and hoverflies treat it like a feeding station. If you're trying to build a garden that actively supports insect populations throughout the season, borage is one of the most efficient plants you can include. Plant it in June, and it establishes fast. It doesn't complain about soil quality, it handles heat well, and it produces flowers quickly without a long waiting period. And once those flowers finish, the self-seeding begins. Seeds fall heavily around the base of the parent plant and also travel short distances from there. In a single season, one borage plant can leave behind dozens of seeds that will germinate the following spring without any intervention. Within 2 or 3 years, you'll have a self-sustaining colony that needs nothing from you except an occasional decision about where you want it to expand. And the interesting thing is, it never feels like too much. Each plant has enough open, airy structure that even a large group of them reads as naturalistic rather than chaotic. 8. Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium. 8th is feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium. And if the previous plants have been bold and dramatic, this one brings something different. precision. Feverfew produces masses of small, white, daisy-like flowers with bright yellow centers that cover the plant in dense, even clusters. The blooms are numerous and neat. The foliage is bright green, deeply cut, and carries a distinctive, sharp scent that actually repels certain insects, which makes it useful as a companion plant near vegetables and softer ornamentals. It's a compact plant, rarely exceeding 2 feet, which makes it one of the most versatile on this list. It fits into borders, cottage garden beds, containers, and even between taller plants without ever overcrowding them. June planting gives it time to build structure before the cooler months, and by the following summer it's fully established and blooming heavily. The self-seeding is quiet but remarkably consistent. Seeds are tiny and drop from the spent flower heads in late summer, settling into nearby soil without spreading aggressively. What you get the following season is a fresh ring of new plants around the previous year's location, slightly different in exact position, but maintaining the same zone in the garden. Over time, Feverfew creates a very stable presence. It doesn't wander far or take over spaces it wasn't invited into. It simply persists reliably in the area where you first introduced it. And in a self-sustaining garden system, that kind of stability is exactly what you need to anchor more dynamic spreaders around it. 9. Phacelia tanastifolia 9th, and finally, Phacelia tanastifolia. And this one might be the most underused plant on this entire list, which is strange because what it does for us garden and for the ecosystem around it is genuinely extraordinary. The flowers are a soft lavender blue in coiled clusters that unfurl as they bloom, almost like a fern frond opening. The texture is delicate, and the colour is one of those rare blues that holds its intensity even in bright summer light. It grows to around 2 feet and blooms steadily through summer, without demanding attention or water once settled. But the most important thing about Phacelia is what happens around it when it blooms. The nectar production is so high and so accessible that it becomes one of the busiest feeding points in any garden. Honeybees, solitary bees, hoverflies, and butterflies all converge on it. It's frequently used by farmers as a cover crop specifically because it draws pollinators in such numbers. In a garden setting, that means everything growing near it benefits from increased pollination activity. Plant it in June, let it bloom through summer, and then, crucially, let the seeds mature and drop naturally before you do any tidying. The seeds are small and germinate readily in warm soil. By the following spring, new seedlings emerge across the surrounding area, and the cycle continues without any effort. What Phacelia does over multiple seasons is quietly build a pollinator hub at the center of your garden system. Other plants around it produce more fruit, set more seed, and attract more life simply because Phacelia drew the insects there first. It doesn't just sustain itself, it helps sustain everything growing around it. And that's where this list leads you. Not just to 9 individual plants, but to an idea about what a garden can actually become when you stop rebuilding it from scratch every year. Self-seeding perennials operate on a different timeline than most gardeners are used to. The first season they settle in, the second season they start to spread. By the third season, they're filling gaps, interacting with each other, and building the kind of layered living structure that people pay landscape designers thousands to create. But here's the real difference. A planted design stays static until someone changes it. A self-seeding garden keeps evolving. It shifts slightly each season in ways that always feel natural, because they are natural. The garden stops being something you maintain and starts being something that grows alongside you. So if you're planting in June this year, even one of these 9 plants is a step toward that kind of garden. Start small if you need to, but start. I want to know, which of these 9 are you adding to your garden this June? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you found this useful, subscribe to Garden Reality, because the next video is going to show you how to design a full seasonal planting calendar around self-seeding plants so your garden stays active and alive from spring all the way through winter. I'll see you there.